The elder had been able to cultivate to the enlightened realm, and he had explored many places in the universe. It was not impossible for a tree to cultivate to the level of an emissary. Now he was considering how to deal with this. Should he report this to the Hall of Honor? A very ordinary face appeared at the top of the tree. It was a man, and he nervously looked at the enlightened elder through the branches with a pleading expression. The enlightened elder was startled when he saw the man, but he quickly bowed deeply. It turned out that the emissary powerhouse was this person and not the tree. I dare not disturb Senior. What instructions do you have? This junior will do his best to fulfill them. The man was sorrowful and he wanted to beg the elder to save him, but there was a branch wrapped around his neck. It was a sapling. The sapling was playful, but to the man it was a threat. The branch could strangle him to death with just a little bit of force. Did the elder not want him to speak? He was about to cry. He had only stolen something, so was there a need for him to encounter such a troublesome situation? The inner verse was too crazy and he wanted to return to the neo-verse. Welcome aboard. Stay tuned and subscribe to Han Li's Wuxia Adventures for more thrilling content. Chapter 1914. Hearing Yao Hong's words, Prince Qing looked at Luo Mei with a dignified expression. You come here. Luo Mei trembled and looked at Prince Qing in fear. Prince Qing's eyes widened. I said come here. Luo Mei was terrified. Prince Qing's face seemed to be magnified infinitely, and he could easily trample her to death. She couldn't move at all. Prince Qing raised his head. You're not coming out? Fine. He reached out to grab Luo Mei. He had the same thought as Yao Hong. If Luo Mei didn't come out, it was obvious that she was afraid. Although he didn't know what method Luo Mei had used to hide herself, since Prince Qing wanted to protect this woman, he had to force her out. An emissary was secretly protecting the brothel? That was impossible. Neither Yao Hong nor Prince Qing believed that this was possible. Just as Prince Qing was about to grab Luo Mei, a palm appeared in front of him and slammed down. Prince Qing's expression changed drastically. A long blade appeared in his hand and he slashed upwards. With a bang, the blade shattered, and the palm slammed into Prince Qing's face without any resistance. Prince Qing was slapped to the ground, sinking deep into the ground. Everyone was silent as they stared blankly. That was Prince Qing, not Qing Yu. It was Prince Qing, an emissary powerhouse, who had been slapped to the ground with a single slap. Yao Hong stared blankly at the ground. At this moment she felt fear. A peerless elite had made a move. Someone who could suppress Prince Qing with a single slap had to have a combat power of at least 700,000. That kind of elite was actually secretly protecting the brothel? No one dared to breathe loudly as they stared at the ground. Underground, Prince Qing recovered with great difficulty, but he didn't come out. In that instant he had felt an irresistible force. That slap had not only slapped him to the ground, but it had also woken him up. He was a powerhouse, but he couldn't resist that slap at all. Prince Qing was very smart. He was able to establish Sky-bearing City and was also the owner of the Longwang auction house. He was calm and domineering, but he didn't lose the slyness of a businessman. That slap had made him realize the difference between them. Dignity and face weren't as important as his life. Was that slap hard to accept? No, it wasn't hard for him. If the other party had used a little more strength, he could have really slapped him to death. He cherished his life more than death. When he thought of this, he walked out of the ground and bowed deeply to Chao Qingyun, Luo Mei, and the other brothel girls. And said, I've offended you. I'll give the brothel an explanation. He grabbed Yao Hong and Qing Yu. And left. It was only after Prince Qing and the others left that everyone reacted. Everyone was silent. Those men hurriedly left. They had been heckling Qing Yu just now. Luyin left as well. Qin Zhou looked at Luyin in shock. Seventh bro, that was King Qing. How did he end things with a single slap? What else? Luyin asked indifferently. Qin Zhou swallowed his saliva. Was it that simple? That was King Qing. Even the expeditionary army didn't need to give him face. His name was known throughout the Neoverse, yet he didn't even dare to resist after being slapped. Just how strong had this person become? Inside the brothel, Shi Shuang had also left in shock. She was well aware of Prince Qing's strength. Before coming here, her grandfather had told her that the two of them were on par. Even so, he had still been slapped. How many experts were there in the universe? Walking out of the brothel, she looked back. His eyes were filled with the vicissitudes of life, and he carried an invisible dignity. This person's rune lines were only slightly weaker than the Sea King's, so he should be the mirror god. The strongest powerhouse in the home of the gods was the candle god, who had been in seclusion for many years. Some people guessed that he had died long ago, while others guessed that he was breaking through to the half-ancestor realm. No one knew the exact details of the candle god, and the second strongest powerhouses were the mirror god and the violet god. The mirror god appeared in the city lord's mansion and glanced around. He paused for a moment before looking at Lu Yin with a calm expression. "Alliance Master Lu, I've heard a lot about you." Lu Yin's lips curled up. "You're the mirror god?" The mirror god stared at Lu Yin, his heart filled with shock. This kid's rune lines were even higher than his own? How was that possible? Hadn't he just become an emissary? At this moment, Lu Yin was brazenly revealing his power level, and the old woman could see it clearly as well. She couldn't help but be shocked. This youth was truly unparalleled in the universe. The cultivators from the home of the gods were stung by Lu Yin's rune lines. Lu Yin had always been the one to observe the rune lines of others, but now he was being observed by someone from the home of the gods, which shocked them greatly. The mirror god was the most shocked. He had cultivated for a long time, but he couldn't compare to a youth who had only cultivated for a few decades. This made him feel indescribably depressed. "I'm the mirror god. I've heard about the brothel incident. What does Alliance Master Lu want?" the mirror god asked. His gaze was no longer calm, and there was an intense fear in the depths of his eyes. He had originally thought that only the second Night King could suppress him in the Great Eastern Alliance, but Lu Yin's rune lines had already surpassed his own. Although he was confident in his cultivation of the Aeon Evolution Scripture, he couldn't determine Lu Yin's bottom line. This youth was terrifying and unfathomable. Lu Yin smiled. "Actually, I don't need any explanation. She's already been taught a lesson. I only invited you here to confirm that the home of the gods has no plans for revenge." The mirror god nodded. "Rest assured, Alliance Master Lu. Yao Hong is ruthless and we will discipline her strictly. Naturally, we won't seek revenge. However, please do not slander the home of the gods. The disciples that we teach are not evil." This was the attitude that the home of the gods should have. They didn't offend anyone, but they also didn't fear anyone. Lu Yin smiled. "Senior Mirror God, may I ask what stage your cultivation of the Aeon Evolution Scripture is at?" The expressions of the Mirror God and the others from the home of the gods changed, as it was taboo to ask someone about their cultivation. The Mirror God frowned. "What do you mean, Alliance Master Lu? I'm just curious, nothing else. After all, I've already cultivated to the knowing realm, and I'm a little lost about the next realm," Lu Yin said. Everyone from the home of the gods looked at Lu Yin as if he were a freak. Only the old woman and the mirror god knew that Lu Yin had already cultivated to the knowing realm. The details of Lu Yin's breakthrough to the Astral Envoy realm and his battle with Progenitor Chen had already spread. Many of Lu Yin's trump cards had been revealed, such as the knowing realm's Aeon Evolution Scripture. They hadn't expected that someone like Lu Yin, who had never cultivated in the home of the gods, would be able to reach the knowing realm. They had wanted to contact Lu Yin and ask if he had obtained the rune technology ruins. Otherwise, how could he explain it? Now that this was brought up, the mirror god's eyes flashed and he waved a hand. "Leave." With each upgrade, the piece of metal grew a little longer. When the fifth upgrade ended, the metal suddenly twisted and connected head to tail, forming a circle that emitted a dark light. Lu Yin watched quietly, and at that moment he felt as if he was looking at life instead of metal. The metal from the myriad beast's cage suddenly leapt up and flew towards Lu Yin. He raised a hand and grabbed it, feeling a slight prickling pain in his palm. He looked at it and saw that there were many spikes protruding from the metal's surface that were trying to pierce through his palm. However, Lu Yin's physical strength was too strong, and the metal couldn't pierce through his palm at all. Still, he felt a slight prickling pain, which meant that the metal's sharpness was close to that of an envoy. It was said that this metal could increase its size and hardness by devouring flesh. Even the celestial imprint would find it difficult to destroy something as large as the myriad beast's cage. It was rumored that the metal that had brought disaster to the fourth mainland had been half the size of the outerverse, and it had only been resolved by a progenitor. This was what Yamavis had said, and it had come from the ancient records of the Mavis family. Lu Yin didn't know if it was true or not. However, looking at the metal's posture, it seemed as if it wanted to devour his flesh. This was a disaster, and Lu Yin's gaze turned cold. He wanted to destroy it, but then he thought of something and his lips curled up. If this metal could bring disaster to the fourth mainland, then it could also bring disaster to others. It all depended on how it was used. Furthermore, he had spent 6 billion star essence to upgrade this metal, so it would be a waste to destroy it just like that. Lu Yin put away the metal. Lu Yin checked his cosmic ring, and his expression turned ugly. He had used up more than half of his star essence to upgrade just 2 items, and there were still 10 billion star essence left in the ring. At his current level, it wasn't enough for him to do anything. He needed to find a bigger cosmic ring and obtain more resources. The more the better. He discovered that even though he had broken through to the next level of star energy, his need for star essence had not decreased at all. In fact, it had increased to an exaggerated extent. After upgrading what he needed, Lu Yin continued to cultivate the inverse step. The might of progenitor Chen's clone's inverse step fascinated Lu Yin. After cultivating in the time-stop space for nearly a year, Lu Yin rolled his die and continued cultivating. For more than half a month, Lu Yin rolled his die and he rolled the time-stop space 5 times. He was rarely this crazy, and it was all because of the inverse step. 5 times stop space meant that he had been cultivating for nearly 5 years. Lu Yin's current inverse step's power far surpassed Chen Zhou's, and it had already reached the level of disrupting the void. It was comparable to progenitor Chen's peak in lighter power, but everyone's understanding of battle techniques was different. Lu Yin did not know if there were any differences between his own inverse step and progenitor Chen's. He carefully recalled the effects of progenitor Chen's inverse step during his origin tribulation. Right, he had forgotten. There was also the wisdom root. Although it was fake, it could allow him to clear his mind. Lu Yin drank a cup of wisdom root tea and carefully recalled his memories. Now that he had cultivated the inverse step and had experienced it before, his understanding of it was completely different from before. Lu Yin closed his eyes and recalled the time when he had undergone his origin tribulation. The first time he had seen progenitor Chen use the inverse step to approach him, he had felt as if he had not just disrupted the void. Everything around him had changed, whether it was space or time. Lu Yin suddenly opened his eyes. How would he explain this to the Genesis courtyard? The negotiations for resources had already reached a stalemate, and now they were even more difficult to negotiate. The expeditionary army had yet to leave the mountain valley, but their morale was completely gone. Long Kuei stared blankly at Long Quan's corpse. When had this branch family head become so unyielding? Elsewhere, Lu Yin had controlled Long Quan's body to commit suicide. The moment of his death, he didn't feel good either. His consciousness returned to his body through the dark space, and the black and white fog in his chest surged as if it had been stimulated. It took a lot of effort to calm down. Lu Yin's lips curled up. This time the cosmic trees were lively. Back then he had been confirmed as Lu Shaoxian, and the 4 cardinal scales had confirmed this. It was impossible to overturn this theory. He had only used Long Quan to annoy the 4 cardinal scales. Everything else aside, he had at least been able to stall for time. He had also been able to split the relationship between the White Dragon clan and the other 3 clans, causing them to have internal conflicts. The death of the creature from the Genesis courtyard had also delayed the progress of their negotiations. Lu Yin guessed that with this ruckus he might be able to buy himself half a year's time. Within that time he had to find a way to deal with the expeditionary army from the cosmic trees. If there was no other way, then he would directly start a war. First, he had to confirm the Hall of Honor's stance.